Hi, friends. Thank you for taking time out of your week to spend a little with me. I appreciate you. This week's case was a suggestion from viewer Carrie, so we thank you in advance. As always, I ask you all to join me as we remember Buck Adam Shook. On July 24, 1993, Robert Franco and two of his friends spent the evening fishing at Oso Creek in Corpus Christi, Texas. The trio of friends had planned to stay into the early morning hours. James had aspirations of catching a specific type of fish and didn't plan on leaving until he accomplished his goal. As the hours carried on, Robert's friends called it a night, falling asleep in the cab of his truck. Robert continued to fish as the sun slowly rose over the horizon. While peacefully awaiting a tug on his fishing line, a voice spoke from behind him. "I've killed my son, and I want you to turn me in." Robert slowly raised his gaze over his shoulder, where he was met with a woman. She was disheveled in appearance. She wore only a t-shirt and underwear, and the little clothing on her person was soaked. It was nearly 5 a.m., and James couldn't believe what was happening. He thought it was a hoax, but the woman beckoned him to follow her. The pair returned to his truck, where she directed him to another section of the creek. She motioned him towards a blue and silver GMC pickup truck, parked on the south side of a nearby bridge. Robert stepped out of his vehicle and walked around to the bed of the truck. The tailgate was left down, and as he approached, he was met with a pair of little feet hanging out. His eyes followed up, where he saw blue lips and ears. Robert returned to the woman, where he explained he was going to get help. He drove to a nearby convenience store where the police were called. Robert returned to the scene with police in tow, where they discovered the boy's body was now carefully arranged in the bed of the pickup truck. He was wrapped in a blanket and placed on what appeared to be an old sofa cushion with a sheet on top. He wore a flower crown made of white and blue flowers. Surrounding his body were trinkets such as 2 teddy bears, one large and pink, while the other a smaller white bear that held a red heart that read "I love you." Both stuffed animals flecked with sand. On the other side of him, a portrait of his parents and a New World Translation of the Bible. Near the truck, investigators discovered a homemade altar pieced together with scrap wood and a second structure that appeared to be some sort of memorial, assembled out of blankets, a pillow, a shelf from a refrigerator, and a wreath made of shrubbery. 2 sets of footprints were discovered in the mud, leading into a small tidal pool area of the creek. There were adult tracks alongside imprints left by the feet of a small child. Only the large tracks could be seen walking out. Small piles of trinkets, similar to those found in the bed of the truck, were found scattered throughout the sand. Police quickly arrested the woman. When asked about the victim, she replied, "He's my son, Buck Shook. I'm Elaine Shook. My son was Satan and I had to kill him. God told me to. He had a dragon in him." Elaine Bray Shook was born in 1956 and a resident of Corpus Christi, Texas since 1987. Elaine was the mother to 4 children: Gina, aged 18, Annalie, aged 5, Buck, aged 4, and Sky, aged 3. Her husband, Craig Shook, described his wife as an attentive mother. She was good with the kids. Craig worked offshore on oil rigs, so Elaine was a full-time homemaker, often left alone with the children. The Shooks lived in a middle-class home where neighbors described them as quiet. They kept to themselves mostly, other than the passing conversation about gardening. Buck often played with the other neighborhood children, where they recalled he was a very sweet boy. The news of the murder shocked neighbors, since Elaine was so close to her children, described as a protective parent. After being detained at the scene, Elaine was interviewed by Nueces County Medical Examiner, where she described how Buck died. She explained she put him on his back in the water, then sat on him. She held him under the water until he stopped fighting. She indicated the reason she killed Buck was that she had spoken to God, and he told her she should do so. In addition to her conversations with God, she made several references to killing the dragon, that she was getting rid of the dragon in Buck. She started talking about the events, but would go completely off topic, describing bizarre symbolic language about things in the Bible. She was very cooperative and forthcoming, but did not speak rationally. They eventually took her to the sheriff's department for a formal interview. During her interview, Elaine was able to provide personal information before she started speaking nonsense and breaking into songs. She told the officer, I want Jesus to come back. He's supposed to come back. Don't you have any faith? I saw the moon. It looked like a white horse with a white helmet, and I thought that must be a sign from Jesus. She sat on the floor with her knees drawn to her chest, switching between the drowning, an upcoming dental appointment, the significance of certain colors, dragons, and a time capsule she created in her backyard. She explained, "Maybe God is just using me for something, and he's going to bring Buck back. I'm a sick puppy." After her interview, Elaine was held in the interrogation room while officers assessed the next steps. Once alone, she became violent. She broke out a window, turned over furniture, and threatened officer with the shards of glass. Elaine was restrained by officers and eventually moved to the psychiatric unit at Memorial Medical Center on a 72-hour hold. During her stay at Memorial Medical Center, she was tested for drug use, which showed positive for traces of marijuana and cocaine. On July 29, 1993, she was officially charged with the murder of Buck. Because of her history and condition, Elaine was transferred to Vernon State Hospital in early August of 1993 to undergo further evaluation at the behest of her attorney. On July 26th, Buck's autopsy was performed, where drowning was ruled as his cause of death. The coroner reported no signs of previous injuries to Buck, detailing the child was clean and healthy. He possessed no fractures and nothing pointed towards abuse. Buck had minor abrasions on his neck, arms, and legs, which were consistent with an intentional drowning since he was resisting. While Elaine was held under surveillance, those close to the situation were interviewed regarding Elaine's history and the days leading up to the murder. According to Craig Shook, Elaine had a history of mental health conditions. Her first diagnosis came in 1982. Elaine jumped into a Massachusetts canal with her oldest daughter, who was 6 at the time. She clung to her mother as they were rescued from the water. Elaine was sent to a psychiatric hospital where she was diagnosed with manic depressive. After the canal incident, she was prescribed lithium, where she seemed to level out. Then, in February of 1991, she willingly committed herself to Charter Hospital for treatment, after she started speaking frequently about religion and the end of the world. During her time, her diagnosis was changed to bipolar disorder, and she was again prescribed lithium to help stabilize her mood. In both instances, she quit taking her medication after she started to feel better. It was discovered at the time of Buck's death, Elaine was no longer taking her medication. Craig wasn't aware Elaine had stopped taking it. He explained on July 24th she displayed no signs of mental distress. Craig stated his wife came to him in the afternoon and said she was taking the 3 youngest children to the grocery store and would be home later. But Elaine nor the children returned to their Ray Street home that night. He discovered that his daughters were left with Roberta Volman, Elaine's best friend at the time, who lived in Flower Bluff. Roberta was interviewed where she confirmed Elaine arrived at her house unexpectedly, around 10 p.m., with only her daughters with her. When she asked about Buck, Elaine claimed he was at his grandmother's house. Roberta described Elaine as shaken and observed mud on the girls' feet and legs. She offered to put the girls in the bathtub to clean them up. Elaine left the home carrying a jug of water and didn't return that night. During the bath, the eldest daughter, Anna Lee, told Roberta her mother had been bad. She explained her mother drowned Buck and he was in a better place now, heaven. Roberta called Craig, then contacted the police department to file a missing persons report for Buck. In the report, she described Elaine as a mental subject who may have injured her child. She stated the mother was having a mental problem. Elaine wasn't seen again until the next morning when she approached the fishermen at Oso Creek. Adam's sisters were interviewed as well, since they were present at the time of his death. Anna told investigators that she watched her little brother struggle and kick in a panicked fight for his life, while their mother held him down in the creek water. She asked her mother what was happening, and she explained to her that Buck wasn't real. He was a robot. Sky, who was also present, was not interviewed in the process, since they weren't sure if she saw the actual drowning. During her time in Vernon State Hospital, Elaine underwent evaluation by several psychiatrists who all shared the same sentiment. She was insane at the time of her son's drowning. They discussed her son's death, and her answers led them to believe she didn't realize it was wrong. Her thoughts jumped from one topic to the next without any logical connection, and she claimed she heard voices in her ears. She thought this was a sign from the devil. She also felt her son was a clone, and that she could tell it wasn't her son, and that she had to kill him so he could become Christ. Based on the observations, she was diagnosed again with bipolar disorder. After another diagnosis, Elaine was prescribed a medication to help stabilize her. Once she was cleared, she was returned to the county jail on August 20th to await her day in court. Her first hearing was in October of 1993, where her competency was in question. Elaine testified to the judge that she needed her 3 daily doses of medication to cope with her crime. She explained she was more nervous without them, and she kept seeing that night, but her medication blocked it off, making it slightly better to be alive. Her attorney, Kenneth Botany, argued Elaine was competent and asked them to forego any hearing since she was stabilized and completely different than the woman he met at Memorial Medical Center back in July. He claimed he was afraid of her, but not anymore. He felt she regained all competency the court felt she didn't have. Elaine was able to discuss for the most part what happened on the day of the offense, and even though he felt she was competent now, he still held firm that she was insane at the time of the crime. He intended to plead insanity regardless. In response, the prosecution argued that a competency trial should be held since the reports from the state hospital indicated she was not competent. The judge asked her several questions, including her personally identifiable information and whether she understood the charge against her. He also asked her if she remembered what happened during the time surrounding her son's death. Elaine replied, "Not all of it, but most of it. I have no memory from July 25th until I woke up in Vernon State Hospital on August 2nd. All those days in between are little fragments." In response, the judge ruled to have a more recent psychiatric evaluation of Elaine, along with the medication she was being prescribed. Both attorneys were required to submit their recommendations for local psychiatrists to perform the evaluation. After another round of evaluations by 2 Corpus Christi psychiatrists, Elaine was determined to be competent to stand trial. Her trial began on January 11, 1994. If convicted of murder, Elaine faced 5 to 99 years, or life in prison, plus a $10,000 fine. If found not guilty by reason of insanity, she faced potential commitment to the state mental hospital with periodic reviews of her condition. The prosecution called several witnesses on the stand, including Robert Franco, Craig Shook, Roberta Volman, and Elaine Shook. They argued that Elaine suffered from a mental illness, but it may not have caused her homicidal actions. They maintained that the illegal drugs had more to do with her behavior than her mental illness. Prosecution believed Elaine killed Adam after taking drugs, and the realization of her actions triggered a psychotic episode. During Elaine's testimony, she confirmed she stopped taking her medication before Adam's murder because of the side effects. She claimed no one told her she needed to continue the prescription. She also stated she smoked marijuana occasionally and did use cocaine 2 days before the murder. Roberta testified on Elaine's drug use, stating her use was more than occasional, and she used illegal drugs and drank frequently. Roberta also confirmed she spoke to Elaine almost daily, but noticed no change in her demeanor leading up to the death. When Elaine returned to the stand on behalf of the defense, she testified about delusions, illusions, and confusions, during which she murdered her son, then prayed for his resurrection. On July 24, 1993, Elaine Shook claimed she spent the day playing with her 3 children and stepson at her home. She hadn't slept in several days, but felt normal for most of the day. After her stepson left later that afternoon is when her paranoia set in. She had these thoughts about her husband. Elaine explained, "I was scared to death of Craig. I thought he was a clone. I was afraid of him, of my neighbors." Elaine then started to pack up random things around the house, including blankets, teddy bears, photos, and a Bible. When Craig asked what she was doing, she lied, stating that the items needed to go to the garage. After putting the items in the bed of her truck, she grabbed her children and left shortly after 8 p.m. Elaine described her state of mind as petrified and feeling like she needed to get away. She didn't remember how or why she ended up at Oso Creek, but once she arrived, she felt safe. The Shook family played together, and she planned on them staying the night, sleeping in the back of the truck, because in the morning Jesus was coming. Buck and his sister Anna took 2 cups of water to wash their feet. Elaine watched the two interact when she suddenly had the thought that Buck wasn't real. She called him a clone, a robot. She felt in that moment that he was not her son. Elaine said Buck walked into the water and filled his cup, and she followed behind him. In a flash, she had Buck under the water. "I didn't think he was a real human being," she recalled. "I was afraid of him." Elaine sent her daughters to the truck and left Buck in the water. She didn't remember driving her daughters to Roberta's house. After leaving them, she returned to Oso Creek. "I went to the water to look at Buck, and he was up on the beach. Something went through my mind that, oh no, maybe he was real, and he tried to call out, and I could have saved him." Elaine tried to pump his stomach and blow into his face. "He can't be real. He's too heavy," she said. She then put him in the rear of the truck and spent the next 7 hours praying. "I got down on my knees and prayed for God to come down. I asked him to rid the world of cancer and oil pollution. I thought God was coming any minute to take over. I thought he was going to resurrect Buck and all the others who had died before." She then found Robert and begged him to get authorities because she wanted the coroner to tell her that Buck wasn't real and everything was going to be all right. After several days of testimony, the jury was sent out for deliberations. On January 15, 1994, after almost 4 hours, the jury determined Elaine Shook was not guilty due to reason of insanity, but she would not be a free woman. Elaine broke into tears as it was read and thanked the jury as she exited the courtroom. Craig and his family didn't have much to say. Craig, who was in the process of divorcing Elaine, stated, "There is no use in talking. It won't bring my baby back." Elaine was ordered to be detained at the county jail until a brief hearing scheduled for the following week in which the judge was to determine Elaine's fate. During this hearing, the judge reviewed Elaine's case and he determined her actions caused bodily injury to another person. For this, he ordered her to be sent to the state hospital where officials would submit periodic reports to the judge to monitor her progress. Once they determined she was stabilized and no longer a threat, they would consider recommending her release. Elaine was sent to Vernon State Hospital for another 8 months. In August of 1994, Elaine was transferred to the San Antonio State Hospital, where she was allowed more privileges, such as unsupervised weekend outings and less surveillance. Both prosecuting attorney and Adam's paternal grandparents were upset with the decision. Neither were consulted in the process, and his grandmother especially felt Elaine should have been held for at least 5 to 10 years so her other children had a chance to grow. She cited safety as her concern. Vernon State Hospital staff presented her social history, case summary, and her psychiatric evaluations to the Texas Department of Mental Health. The board decided on June 1st she was not a danger and could be transferred. Then, over a year later, she was released from San Antonio's mental hospital. After just 2 years in the mental health facilities, Elaine was granted freedom on November 29, 1995. Elaine moved to San Antonio. She was placed under court supervision for the rest of her life. She also had a caseworker assigned to her case that tracks her progress and has the power to send her back to the state hospital at any time. Buck was laid to rest at the Seaside Memorial Park in Corpus Christi, Texas. Hi friends, if you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. As always, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, so leave them below and we can chat about this case. If you found this to be informative, please consider giving the video a thumbs up to let YouTube know you want more from me. And lastly, if you're not subscribed yet, you should, because we would love to have you under the ash tree. I appreciate all of your kindness and support you all send the channel each week. You are the best, and I hope you have the best week ahead of you, because you deserve it. But for now, we must part ways. So stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, friends.